He tells her that he's looking for a book, one that is related to history, but she interrupts him and casts some spells, conjuring up a weird ball of light that starts floating towards Bjorn. He's confused about what magic she cast. Then the ball of light shimmers its way into his chest. Bjorn is unsure of what changed because he doesn't feel any different. The librarian tells him that now he can find any book that he's looking for in the library. She also tells him that he's allowed to borrow any book, but he has to put it back where he takes it from. Bjorn tries to ask for details about the magic, but the librarian already becomes the Sleeping Beauty. After that, he walks around in the library. He quickly realizes how the magic works. It's quite simple. All he has to do is walk around, and the book he wants to read would shine. Now he understands why there's only one librarian in a library this big, and she still has time to sleep. After that, he starts reading books. The first book, titled The Fallen World, talks about the history from thousands of years ago, where no living beings could live due to a witch's curse, and the last remaining fortress, Rafdonia, was the only place that managed to avoid the disaster. The royal family opened up a dimension for the people who were starving to death because of limited resources. That became the labyrinth. This was similar to the game's prologue. He already knows it. Then the second book he read was Alchemy's Basics. It talks about how magic crystals from monsters can be made into bread, water, steel, and such. They are literally changing the atomic structure. Isn't it too much? Well, it was also too much for Bjorn to understand the theory, so he just memorized it for now. After that, the next book was Is Sacred War 3. It talks about how the barbarians and the elves come to hate each other. The fourth book he really wants to read about was The Evil Spirits of the Abyss. The evil spirits refer to those people who had come from different dimensions and had possessed other people's bodies. This was technically correct, but it doesn't describe why it happens. It's clear that the temples and the royal family had tried their hardest to get rid of this phenomenon. Well, what I think is that someone from the royal family is also one of the people from Earth, like Earth. And then he made it public to get rid of any competition. Well, it's just my theory. He learned one thing from it, and that is, as long as he didn't say any of the forbidden words, he would be pretty much okay. The fifth book, titled On the Death of the King, is about the first ever king, also called the Immortal King, Lavajan III. It talks about how he died over 150 years ago. Basically, he lived for thousands of years, since he was the first king, and I think it's also related to evil spirits and my theory. The game's story started after his death. So that means Bjorn was 150 years after the game timeline. This is why his knowledge of the game world kept contradicting the reality in this world. Previously, I think I said it was a 10-year gap, but it was actually a 150-year gap. After that, he moved on to the book about the dimension's instability of observation records. While reading this book, Bjorn had a realization that this might be the book that the blondie who had saved him had read. This book mentions a theory that says entering a portal in the moment that it was closing could have something to do with that instability. Perhaps that is why that happened to him. That made him feel depressing because he had no one else to blame but himself for the torture he had to go through. It had gotten dark outside, so he decided to read the rest later. After that, he goes back to his room and thinks about how it had been 3 whole days since he had left the labyrinth. The labyrinth opens up on every first day of the month at exactly midnight. So he has 27 days left to prepare himself, and he has to find a new member for his party from tomorrow onwards.